Okay, so next question on my list is question 18 from section 2 of Prep Test 84. And this question type is kind of similar to an inference question, but there are a couple differences. So here we're trying to complete an argument, right? So the difference between this and must be true is that with must be true, we just get a series of facts, and there are some deductions that we can make from that set of facts, but the relationships between the facts in that set are not, so we can't assume that they are connected to each other the way that premises are to a conclusion in an argument. Whereas here, we have to view the facts that were given as premises that are leading towards a conclusion. So with this one, because we're trying to complete an argument rather than see, what deduction we can reasonably make from a set of facts, we have to think about the relationship between the ideas a little bit more. We have to think about tone. So there's, where does this argument kind of seem to be heading based on the tone that's already there, rather than just looking at it as a fact set. So here, this, little line here at the end, that's where we would input the correct answer choice to make this an argument. We want that sentence to flow. And so in order for it to flow, it kind of has to have a similar rhythm or a similar tone to what we have there already. That is kind of like a nebulous idea, right? So, if I find something that's like clearly not the right tone, then I'll try to point that out and make that more clear, right? Because nebulous ideas aren't that helpful when we're trying to, get that one correct answer consistently. So yeah, if I see something that's like clearly not the right tone, I will definitely point that out. But yeah, I mean, I guess the idea is we do want to be pulling a thread through the argument and for there to be some kind of reasoning structure here. Often with these, they're asking you almost to like, maybe complete an analogy. It's like, what type of evidence are they giving you? And then that's going to lead to the type of reasoning that you want to complete, right? And so what the type of reasoning is going to influence the type of conclusion. So yeah, the example that I gave would be like reasoning by analogy. We would want to make sure that we are using the analogy, right? And we get to our conclusion that it fits with the analogy that we're given, that everything has like a parallel in that analogy. So that would just be one example. So we'll see what we've got here. But yeah, hopefully some of the things that I've said about the question type will make sense when we do the example. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think I mentioned before, like I like reading the question stem first because that can give you some clues on how to approach the stimulus. One of the things that actually people say as a con to this method, right, like a negative to the method of reading the question stem first, is that it might prevent you from like just focusing on understanding the stimulus. So yes, you want to be trying to answer the question and you want to have an idea of like what your focus needs to be in order to answer the question. But first and foremost, yes, of course, you have to understand what you're reading. So if you're finding that the reading comprehension part of logical reasoning is a challenge, like that is something where you kind of may need to step back a little bit, and just slow down as you go through, sentence by sentence. But I mean, I still stand by my recommendation that you read the question stem first. Why not allow the clues in that, like the clues that you comprehend by reading that, to influence your reading of the stimulus as well. So I still stand by that recommendation. But in terms of taking a step back, what I mean is working less with the question type kind of issues in logical reasoning and more on understanding the stimulus, and maybe step back is the wrong phrase. Maybe it's more about slowing down. And I think, taking it sentence by sentence. So yeah, that's just, I guess, a little rabbit trail for this one, but I'm getting into the stimulus now. Okay, so some people prefer to avoid facing unpleasant truths and resent those whose unwanted honesty forces them into such a confrontation. Okay, so some people want to avoid and they resent unwanted honesty. Actually, and they resent those whose unwanted, so they actually don't just resent the honesty, but the people who are honest and they don't want it. Okay, so some people are this way, and others dislike having any information, however painful, knowingly withheld from them. So we have a group that doesn't want people to be honest with them all the time, right? A group that is like, you know what, just tell me what I want to hear. Tell me something nice. I don't want to hear your honest opinion, let's say, right? Or even the honest facts. I just kind of want to live in the ignorance is bliss sort of mindset. And then there's this other group of people that absolutely always wants the truth no matter what. Just, rip the Band-Aid off, tell me the truth. I want to live in reality no matter the cost. So this is one thing to note right away. We've got some people and we've got other people. Those are not two like groups that encompass every single person necessarily, right? So there may be people who wouldn't identify with either of these groups very strongly, or maybe they like to avoid unpleasant truths, but they don't resent people who force them into a confrontation necessarily, right? And some people, don't really like having information withheld from them, except in like just a small number of exceptions, right? So we could have some kind of gray in between these two groups potentially, and the language of some people are like this and others are like this doesn't actually exclude the possibility that there would be like a third group of people. So that's one thing to note about the structure there. But on the whole, what we've got here is a comparison. And so the reasoning here, the reasoning structure is comparative, right? There's like a contrast between these two groups. and then we'll see what are we going to do with that. It is obvious then, so this would be like a phrase indicating a conclusion. Okay, so it is obvious then that if those in the former group, all right, so the former group is the avoidance group, are guided by the directive to treat others as they themselves want to be treated. So how would they treat others then, right? If this former group is treating people the way they want to be treated, they would want people to lie to them, right? They resent people whose unwanted honesty forces them into confrontation. So they want to be lied to. They want people to knowingly withhold painful or unpleasant truths from them. So if in the former group, they are guided by that directive, then now we've got the former group, and this whole time, the reason it's all about comparing these two groups. So I would think, well, if we've talked about the former group, then we're going to say something about the latter group, right? And how would the latter group feel, and what's the relationship between these two groups, right? So if the former group is guided by the directive to treat others the way they want to be treated, they would lie to people, right? And how would the latter group feel about that? Well, they don't like lying, no lying whatsoever. So these two groups of people, if either of, if you have two people, one of them is from the avoidance group and the other one is from the truth at any cost group, they're probably not going to get on very well, right? Because the first person, the avoidance group person, is going to lie and want to be lied to, and the truth at any cost person is going to both tell the truth and be resented by the first group, and they're also going to dislike that the person in the first group is lying to them. So there's going to be some conflict, and this treat others as they themselves want to be treated rule or directive is, in a perfect world, I guess, right, supposed to make sure that everybody gets along really well, right? Treat others as you yourself want to be treated is like the golden rule, right? It's this, empathy and all this, right? But if you don't have the same feelings or the same preferences as other people, and you're treating them the way that you would prefer to be treated, then maybe it actually isn't going to work out where everybody's happy. So, that's going maybe a little bit deeper than we need to go here. I think the first thing would be the whole thing rests on a comparison between these two groups. So we've got to follow that through. We have the former group, so we've got to say something about the latter group. And that's got to fit with the beginning of this sentence. So, okay, so answer choice A. A doesn't talk about the latter group at all, right? It just says that the people in the former group are going to sometimes withhold comment in situations in which they would otherwise be willing to speak. The idea of, not speaking versus being willing to speak, yes, they will sometimes withhold information, right? If they think that it's unpleasant, they will withhold information from people. But this idea of in situations in which they would otherwise be willing to speak doesn't, the way that that's phrased doesn't actually make me think, oh no, they're actually going to avoid in like times when it's unpleasant, right? And otherwise be willing to speak. Like, when would they be willing to speak? When would they not be? Well, we know it has to do with whether it's unpleasant or not. So, the directive isn't causing them to withhold things. Their preferences are causing them to withhold things because of the directive. So that one's a little bit tangled, but certainly there's no comparison between the two groups. The other group isn't mentioned at all. Don't love that. So A is definitely out. B, so group A, will sometimes treat those in the latter group in a manner the members of this latter group do not like. Yeah, because the latter group dislikes having information knowingly withheld. So yeah, this one's perfect. Okay, so it deals with how do you treat people, which is what the directive has to do with. The latter group, so that comparison, keeps that thread running through. And then we have in a manner the members of the latter group do not like. So the do not like part is perfect because that group dislikes having information knowingly withheld from them, which is exactly what group A would do if they followed the directive. So it really threads through perfectly. So B has got to be the correct answer here. Okay, and then C, okay, that if in the former group they act in a particular way, or they are guided by this directive, which we know would mean they would act in a particular way, then those in the latter group must be guided by an entirely different principle of behavior. No, actually. So it's possible that both groups are guided by that principle of behavior, by the golden rule. The result of that would be conflict between them, right? Dislike and resentment. But the actual principle of behavior doesn't have to differ between the groups just because their preferences are different. Okay, so that would be a false assumption to make. Okay, so C is out. D, those in the latter group will respond by concealing unpleasant truths. No, actually. So in the latter group, we don't know how they would respond, right? It doesn't say that the people in the latter group are just going to treat these people the way that they treat others, right? So we don't know what directive they are living by about how to treat people. So we don't know how they're going to respond to this treatment. We do know that they don't like having information withheld from them. So if someone lies to them, does that mean that they're going to lie back? Or withhold information because this other person has withheld information? We don't know. Are they just going to mirror the behavior that they see, or are they going to treat people the way they want to be treated and tell the truth no matter what because that's what they like? So yeah, we can't say how they're going to respond. And then E, the result will meet with the approval of both groups. And that's the exact opposite of what we think is going to happen, right? So the result would be that the second group would dislike what's happening. We don't know how they're going to respond. And so we don't know how the first group will feel about the result. But we do know definitely that the latter group isn't going to like being lied to. So B is the correct answer here. Click through that. Yeah, so that's B. Hopefully that was helpful and made sense. I know it was another kind of long-winded one. These are like relatively rare as a question type. I mean, you're going to get one in a section or, maybe in 2 seconds. Yeah, they're not that common, but I think it's such a great question type to spend a lot of time with because you really do have to think a lot about predicting where the argument is headed. And for a lot of the stimuli, you get arguments, right? For the majority of them, you get arguments. And as you're reading them, a really great reading comprehension skill to have is the ability to anticipate or predict what's coming next. And that's actually a way as well to maintain a level of interest in the subject matter, even if it wouldn't really interest you that much otherwise. But if you think about like, okay, I've got to try to anticipate what comes next, you're really going to be paying attention to what's happening currently so that you can make that prediction, right? And it also helps because you're getting into the mindset of the test writers a little bit. Again, by doing that, anticipating and predicting. So yeah, I do think that if you wanted to focus a bit on a question type, even though this question type, like I said, is on the rare side, it still has a lot of value. And I think um, a lot of the question types, even if they are a bit rare as a type, they still have a lot of value that's transferable to other questions. So, anyways, that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Um, but but yeah, I think that was an interesting one, and hopefully um, my demonstration of how I would approach it in a lot of detail there. But my demonstration is valuable for other question types as well. Okay, so I will leave it there and go through and stop recording.